Meeting and surpassing all audience expectations every day. Rush Limbaugh, your guiding light and America's real anchorman. Here at 800-282-2882. I want to get into this Amir Tahari column that ran New York Post yesterday. Headline, Brussels is what happens when liberals do not push immigrants to integrate. But that headline doesn't even cover the main thrust of this piece. Now, I'm going to do something very rare. I'm going to tell you what this column says before reading the excerpts. I'm going to give you just a bit of analysis, because it's a long piece. It prints out, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. It prints out to over 9 pages. It's a very, very in-depth piece. It is a brilliant column. Mr. Tahari even gets the fundamental problem. It's not just that you cannot have peace if you import and immigrate a bunch of assimilation-resistant, ideologically driven people. It's not enough. You can't, in other words, if that's all you do, you still have a fighting chance to save your country. If you're going to openly allow to immigrate people to your country who are not going to assimilate, and we've been doing that. We have not been requiring assimilation. That's a stark difference between the immigration of today and the immigration prior to 1986. Immigration prior to 1986, all the way up to the late 1800s and in 1965, assimilation was why they came. They wanted to become Americans. They wanted to be part of what was a distinct and unique American culture that contained elements of the American dream, which didn't exist anywhere else in the world. Yes, they might have lived together, formed basic neighborhoods, the Italian, the Irish, and they kept their identities, but they became Americans, proudly so. They learned English, for example. They did everything they could to let everybody know they were Americans. And that hasn't been happening since 1986. The immigration since, we've been doing the opposite of assimilation. We've been allowing immigrants to maintain their natural language and printing signs and everything in public in 3 or 4 different, however many languages is necessary. We have not forced immigrants to learn English, and without that, there is no way they can become part of the American culture. But the second half of this is the left, the Democrat Party, however you want to characterize it, their war, the war that they are conducting on the values and principles that have defined America, is erasing the culture anyway. It's a two-pronged problem. And this is fundamental to understand what happened to Brussels. You know, the 19 hijackers, many of them headquartered in Brussels, some in Hamburg. Brussels has long been a terrorist safe haven. This column goes on to explain why. But the point here is that liberalism, and by Obama's own admission, his objective is to fundamentally transform America. That means erase the institutions, traditions that have defined our greatness, the culture. Erase it and replace it. And we're in the process of doing it now. You see what's happening in North Carolina and Georgia just recently. Transgender bathrooms and the NFL, so forth, threatens these states economically. That if you pass legislation that requires men to use the men's room and women to use the women's room, we're not going to bring the Super Bowl. I mean, there is an all-out war on the American culture, and it's been going on for a long time, and it's brought to you by the Democrat Party. It's brought to you by the left. So when you combine immigration that is not required to assimilate because you're in the process of destroying the culture anyway, well, hello, that's exactly what happened to Brussels and is what is happening in the United States. The left's war on our principles and values is erasing the culture this country was founded with. It's erasing the culture you would want immigrants to assimilate into. It's being done purposefully. Belgium should not even exist. Belgium has never been a real country, which I will explain in a moment. It was created in the post-war era as a buffer between Germany and France. But because it was not a real country, meaning there were not native inhabitants of a singular nationality and culture, it easily became a European version of what they have in the Middle East, in Pakistan, Afghanistan, an ungoverned territory. It has no real sovereign to speak of, no dominant home culture. It's you wouldn't be very wrong if you said it was stateless. Afghanistan is stateless. This is why Al-Qaeda wanted to go in there. When there's no state, when there's no official sovereign regime, it's easy to go in and establish your own. So they create a Potemkin country of Belgium, not really supposed to be a nation. It was a buffer zone between Germany and France, but even worse, they attacked the idea of nationhood itself when they established it, convinced that Hitler rose because there was too much German patriotism for Germany. Even so, I mean, you know that story. It's like saying we should never have access to fire, because despite that there are millions of life-saving, life-creating, life-generating good things fire makes possible. Look at what happens if it's done irresponsibly. So we're going to outlaw fire. Well, this is the kind of thinking the left engages in, and it's what they have done in creating and establishing this so-called nation of Belgium. So over time, what do they destroy nationalism with? The left. How do they attack nationalism? We're under attack here. You know, when you hear attacks on nationalism or populism, it's trying to make a bugaboo out of people who put their own country first. That's braggadocio, that's xenophobia, that's racism, you're not supposed to put your own country first. That's selfish. We're supposed to be citizens of the world, don't you understand? And we're no better and no different than anybody else, and that's Obamaism. So the concept of Europe and the closely related system of socialism there to undermine cultural and economic connections to one's own nation. So you have, in Europe now, you have a continent of people who've been taught not to believe in anything and not to be attached to their nations. They've done that with open borders, wanton immigration with no assimilation. The attack on nationalism has not just been here, it's all over Europe, and they have swallowed it. They embraced it. They thought it was great multiculturalism. They thought they were saying that they were great people, that they were non-discriminatory, they were open to one and all, and they literally allowed their own identities to be dissolved. And now they're in the process of being swallowed, overrun, and taken over. You have a continent of people who have been taught not to believe in anything, not to be attached to their own nations. And because something always beats nothing, they're being overrun by a bunch of 7th century zealots, militant Islamists, and they've let it happen. Belgium, a classic illustration and example of how. Get into details in a moment after we take another obscene profit timeout. Lots of other stuff coming up today, too, but this is crucial because, folks, it's happening here. Whether it is a job that could be completed here as it has been in Europe, too close to call, but it's really, really frightening. And I don't think enough people see it for what it is and the way it is. So we'll make an effort and stab at it when we get back. Well, I just got an email from a friend who said that what I'm doing is a lost cause because you are incapable of understanding my point. A friend of mine just said, practically verbatim in his email, you are attempting to explain fire to fish. Meaning, if you all are fish, fire isn't possible in your environment. And here I am trying to explain it. So is this too esoteric? Are you incapable of understanding my point here of how, in fact, militant Islamist combined with the left and its attempted destruction of our culture is making us a sitting duck? Let me give it a shot. Because I think even you may be fish, but if there's anybody that could explain fire to fish, it's me. And they're all nodding their heads in agreement in there. Brussels is what happens when liberals do not push immigrants to integrate. But again, that's just half the problem. The other half of the problem is that liberals are destroying cultures, native, distinct, honorable national cultures everywhere under the name of multiculturalism. I mean, there's nothing to assimilate to. On Tuesday, when Islamist suicide bombers blew themselves up in Brussels, the European Union's foreign policy representative, the Italian Federica Mogherini, happened to be on an official visit to Jordan. Fighting back tears, she cut short a news conference saying, "It's a very sad day for Europe, what happened here in Belgium. Europe and its capital are suffering the same pain the Middle East has known and knows every single day, be it Syria, be it elsewhere." Brussels, by the way, is the capital, European Union. That's why it's the future utopia for a lot of people. She then mused about the role that Islam may have played in the tragedy, dismissing the idea of a clash between Islam and the West. Islam, said Federica Mogherini, Islam holds a place in our Western societies. Islam belongs to Europe. I'm not afraid to say that political Islam should be part of the picture. Hey, why don't you just sign the death warrant, Miss Mogherini? Because she's classic. She illustrates the problem. She refuses to see it for what it is. It's as justified as the Social Democrats, as the Tories, the Whigs. It doesn't matter. They're as justified as anybody else. Islam holds a place in our Western societies. Islam is a religion, for crying out loud, guided by an ideology. Her statement offers an insight into the mentality that has helped produce the situation in Western European societies where fear is woven into the fabric of daily life. It's a world of illusions and false identities. In Mogherini's world, the sufferings of Syrians caused by a savage regime is on the same par as the sufferings of inhabitants of European capital cities like Madrid, London, Paris, and now Brussels, that have come under attack from jihadists who kill at random. In that world, political Islam, far from being an adversary dedicated to your destruction, becomes part of the family. That's exactly what they've done. But Ms. Mogherini fails to see the logical conclusion of her analysis, which is this. If Islam is no longer religion, if Islam is just another political party, then why shouldn't it be subjected to the same treatment, including criticism, as any other political party or ideology? And if it poses a present and clear danger, face outright suppression. In other words, they want it both ways. One day it's a religion, and you can't touch it. It's the religion of peace. The next day it's a legitimate political party, except we can't criticize it because that would be racist or bigoted or what have you. So what happened in Brussels was a co-production by two sick ideologies. The first one is Islamism in its many versions. And whatever version you talk about could be Khomeiniism, Talibanism, Wahhabism in Saudi Arabia. It will remain firmly in place until it implodes under the weight of its own contradictions, like the Soviet Union did, or until it's defeated in a war, as was the case with Nazi Germany and imperialist Japan. But the other producer, The other co-producer in this disaster, the mushy and politically correct liberal ideology that has seduced segments of opinion in Western democracies. It can and must be combated by all those who wish to protect the democrat system in an increasingly dangerous world. It started in the 60s in Brussels when the post-war boom created a shortage of workers. There are 3 different languages spoken in Belgium. They were put together on a map. Lines were drawn, buffer between Germany and France. And the French-speaking Walloons decided they didn't have enough workers to compete with the other 2. Germany is another language that's spoken. So they began to allow immigration from all parts of the Middle East, much as Angela Merkel said at the beginning of this current phase, opening the border to anybody from Syria, anywhere in the Middle East, opening to let them come in because there's a shortage of workers. The birth rate replacement level is below normal. They need an expanding labor force, and Germany is not producing enough people to fill it, so open the borders. She's paying the price for it now, but that's what happened in Belgium way back when, and who flooded the zone, so to speak. And they have been given political credibility. Meanwhile, liberalism, socialism, the European Western social democratic model is doing the same thing the left is doing in this country, attacking the fundamental nationality and culture of each individual country, trying to erase it and replace it with whatever they dream their utopia to be. So there's nothing to assimilate to. So borders are open to one and all to come in and be who they were rather than assimilate. And it's bye-bye country. Be it Belgium, be it the United Kingdom, be it Denmark, take your pick. Be it the United States. It's underway here, too. So, there you go, fish. I just tried to tell you about fire. Light the match. And by the way, Tony Blair, who is the Barack Obama of the United Kingdom, he's a bit more likable guy, but Tony Blair, the Obama of the UK. Tony Blair says Brussels, the terror attacks in Brussels, follows from flabby liberalism that can't prevent terrorism, can't stop it. And little does he know how right he is. He's actually agreeing and affirming what Amir Tahari has written in the New York Post. He says it in different ways. The point is, it's not an isolated view. By the way, fish have seen blowtorches. Oil rigs, they know what fire is.